And so I said, here's the thing, I'm struggling. And she said, what's the struggle? And I said, well, I have a vulnerability issue, and I know that vulnerability is kind of the core of shame and fear and our struggle for worthiness, but it appears that it's also the birthplace of joy, of creativity, of belonging, of love, and I think I have a problem, and I need some help.
Vulnerability. What is it? The word vulnerability comes from the late Latin word vulnerabilis, which means wounding. From Latin, vulnerare, to wound, hurt, injure, maim, and from vulnus, wound. According to Oxford academics, vulnerability in the act of being vulnerable means capable of being wounded. It is not a state of being actively harmed or suffering in pain, but it opens up the possibility. It's a risk. Why is it such a risk to us? Vulnerability, more specifically emotional vulnerability, opens us up to the possibility to emotional pain. Emotional exposure can lead to backlash from the people we love. We could be judged, we could be viewed differently, we could get taken advantage of, and we could, to put it plainly, get hurt. And it's not our fault either. It's wired into our brains after thousands of years of evolution. According to neuroscience research, the neural pathways of physical and emotional pain overlap. They're activated in the same part of your brain. I'm about to say a lot of big fancy words, but trust me, it'll make sense in a second. It starts in a section of your brain called the limbic system. The limbic system is a part of the brain that is heavily involved in our behavioral and emotional responses, especially responses related to our survival. The anterior insula and the anterior cingulate cortex, parts of the limbic system, are activated when experiencing both physical and emotional pain. The brain takes these activations to the amygdala, another part of the brain involved in the limbic system. The amygdala acts as the brain's smoke detector. Mindlift describes the amygdala as, everywhere you go, you're carrying a small smoke detector with you, and this smoke detector scans your environment for danger. And once our amygdala detects danger, which can range from an extremely traumatic experience to getting an email from your boss, the amygdala sends messages down the brainstem to the hypothalamus, resulting in a fight, flight, or freeze response. Additionally, when the hypothalamus is repeatedly activated in early childhood, the brain has reduced connections between other parts of the brain. Carrying into adulthood, this impacts our ability to learn, to form connections, to regulate emotions, to think, to be calm, and to reflect. Basically, the limbic system remembers. If you face a traumatic experience or extreme fear that resulted in rejection, abandonment, betrayal, or any other type of emotional pain, the brain will remember. Scientifically, this is why we struggle being vulnerable. Our brain reads it as a risk. I think we all know and understand some sort of element of this process, but for me personally, having a scientific explanation for my fear helps it feel more validated.
So, what is it, like Will has an attachment disorder? Is it all that stuff?
Now that it scientifically has an explanation, how did we, socially, take on such an invulnerable society? The shame that comes with being openly vulnerable stems from the way our culture and society is shaped. Staying local to the United States, our culture is taught to view vulnerability and emotional expression as a weakness. We can start at the sociological perspective of the United States, Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory. This theory is the framework to understand differences in cultures around the world. One dimension of this theory is masculinity versus femininity, the gender role differentiation of a culture. According to simple psychology, a masculine society is one that values assertiveness, courage, strength, and competition, while a feminine society values cooperation, nurturing, and quality of life. The United States has a masculine score of 62 out of 100, meaning the United States places more value on a masculine society rather than a feminine one. The history of a masculine society's rise in the United States is due to many factors, the main one being industrialization and the rise of capitalism. Capitalism itself rewards ambition and independence and places value in strength, productivity, and competition. In such a cutthroat environment, there's no room for emotions. Emotional openness was deemed counterproductive, in a system so reliant on efficiency. All these factors have cultivated into our society today to produce a culture where showing emotions and asking for help is a weakness. We grow up in households where showing too many emotions causes negative consequences from our caregivers. We've all felt it. We've all felt scared, cornered, exposed. EFP itself is a vulnerable class because you have to allow yourself to be seen when presenting your projects. It can be dreadful. I wanted to dive deep into it. What is stopping us from being completely 100% seen? How can we break down those walls? What are we so afraid to show? So, I created a question. What's one thing you're afraid to admit? When I first started brainstorming for this documentary project, I took a lot of inspiration from those on-the-street interviews of strangers. YouTubers like Thorea and TikTokers like Nikash Kiana, they take snippets of stories from strangers and put them on display. Stories of grief, hope, loss, struggle, and love. I wanted to run my own experiment. I found a ballot box and stuck a piece of paper to it, asking, "What's one thing you're afraid to admit?" I let it sit in the equipment room for a week. Everybody say thank you, Phil. Honestly, I had absolutely no idea what to expect. I was nervous, but excited to see what Rosencrantz had to offer. A week later, I gathered all the responses, sat down, and read every single one out loud.
Today was the Rosencrantz funeral, so I'm feeling very emotionally vulnerable right now. I beat my sister in her sleep to get back that she ate my Frosted Flakes. Okay, guys, I'm not sure we understood the assignment.
I was not prepared for these responses at all. At the start, a lot of them were not taking the question seriously, and I was disappointed.
All right, someone wrote, "I eat crayons." Please.
But as I progressed through reading them, they started to hit harder and harder. Honestly, I expected service level responses, but I got a lot more than that. So let's break these submissions down. 58% of people embraced the question. They answered honestly. 42% of people avoided the question. They put something irrelevant, just for laughs.
Hear me out. Cold tea from Ratatouille. I gotta look up who that is. Hold up. Oh no, that's real. Okay, come on. That's not a hear me out. She was bad.
Whether intentional or not, this can display how humor and deflection can act as a defense mechanism. Humor acts as a wall. It's very common. We all do it. The difference is when it comes to joking about addressed grievances and ones we're trying to avoid. It's another example of emotional avoidance. Why did these people feel the need to joke around instead of answering the question? Or maybe it's not that deep.
I don't wash my legs in the shower?
Let's break down what people submit. Out of the 58 that embraced the question, over half, 55%, was about personal trauma. 11% were more self-centered responses one would consider selfish.
I often don't feel bad when I make others feel bad.
And lastly, around a third, 33%, were about doubt. With doubt, around half of the responses were doubts about themselves.
I don't like myself / love myself and feel no pride in my accomplishments. People think I'm happy.
About a third were doubts about their achievements in college.
I'm afraid to admit I am nervous to start a content page to showcase my work. I don't want to doubt myself, but it's hard to be vulnerable. That's what this is all about.
And the remaining ones were doubts about the future.
I didn't do enough in college, and none of my work may be good enough to have a successful career.
When it came to personal trauma, there was a wide variety. They dove into heavy topics, ranging from deep fears, self-harm, attempted suicide, and sexual abuse. If I went up to people in person, I feel like I wouldn't have gotten as honest of answers as I did through this sort of anonymous experiment. So, what was the point of all of this? Through writing these notes anonymously, the writer is protected from any consequences and responses they would receive from saying their answer out loud, with a name and face assigned to themselves. Being anonymous takes away the weight of assigning ourselves to our struggles. In avoiding vulnerability, we build walls around ourselves. We close people off, and we swear we never cared about the people that hurt us. Building those walls is a retreat. Creating distance from something that can bring us emotional pain is easy. Avoidance is the easy way out. You create a space where you can retreat to alone. But in these spaces, you block out the beautiful things about vulnerability. It's not an easy process. It's not black and white. There's no formula that magically opens you up. It's a lot of internal and external work. It can start with taking chances that could lead you to rejection. It could be owning up to your mistakes and apologizing for them. Reconnecting with friends that you fell off with. It could be allowing yourself to feel difficult emotions. You're able to confront your struggles and share them with others. There's connection in sharing personal experiences and struggles. To quote one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver, "Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine." Vulnerability has a direct relationship with your self-worth. If you do not fully accept yourself for who you are, you will never be able to be your authentic self with someone else. You have to acknowledge that, yes, you are flawed. You are imperfect. Life is flawed. Life is imperfect. The mistakes you have made do not define you, and you have to allow yourself to forgive yourself. You have to have compassion for yourself. You have to stop trying to prove your worth, and instead, believe it. I think it's a lifelong battle. I don't want, "Oh, just be vulnerable," to be your corny takeaway from this documentary, because it's tasteless if you do not actually apply it. I found, personally, letting in these difficult emotions truly let me appreciate what is so precious about life. It's why the films I used in this video mean so much to me. It's about struggle and the beauty that comes with it. We have to accept both sides. I'll leave you with a new question. Think of your most beautiful memory. How did you get there? What did it take?
Because when we work from a place, I believe, that says, I'm enough, then we stop screaming and start listening. We're kinder and gentler to the people around us, and we're kinder and gentler to ourselves. That's all I have. Thank you.